Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, November 8th, 2013. I'm coming to you from the beautiful South Carolina coastline. Well, first up, big story. I know you've heard it all week long. I've had guests on this week, Carrie Lutz, talking about ObamaCare. And ObamaCare is a disaster and an unfolding, growing disaster. And I want to just back up here. Remember right after the government shutdown was over, all the Democrats were on TV saying, oh, we're going to win back the House. That's all we're ready to go, man. Things are great. The Republicans took all the heat for this. And fast forward to just a few weeks. And I told you back then that, the government shutdown is going to be forgotten. The Democrats still have ObamaCare. Well, what's happened? If you have your health plan, you can keep it. No, you can't. If you have your doctor, you can keep it. In many cases, no, you can't. Oh, it's going to save you money. That's not according to the people that write me on my website. I have yet to have a single person write me and say, wow, I got health insurance and it was way cheaper than I thought or way cheaper than I was paying. For example, one guy writes me and says, hey, for my family, I was paying a little more than $860 or so, and that just about doubled. His premiums doubled. He was canceled. His premiums are now about doubled. And his deductible went way up. His co-pays went up, and he is upset. And this is the story you're hearing over and over again from millions of people who are finding out, no, you can't keep a plan that doesn't conform to the Affordable Care Act. You can't keep one. Do you realize why they put off the employer mandate? Do you think that you're going to be able to keep your plan just the way it is if you work for a big company? Do you think you're going to at least pay more or be taxed on it? Or maybe you'll just have your plan cut and you'll be forced into the government system? That's a shoe that has yet to drop after the 2014 elections. But beforehand, take a look at what the Democratic senators, the people up for election, they're worried and they're talking to President Obama about this plan. And, they should be worried. I don't see how they put this genie back in the bottle. They need all these payers with these individual plans. And I think they need even more payers, and that's what the next year, the 2015, the employer mandate, where they have to deploy health care for any company with 50 or more employees. But I think the whole scheme changes. I think they're doing exactly what they wanted to do, but what they didn't calculate was the political backlash. They want a single-payer system. And what they didn't calculate is the people who are going to be paying way more. And Obama and the Democrats will always keep the far left, just like Bush and the Republicans would always keep the far right. It's the middle that's the problem. And the middle is going to be upset, and they're going to continue to be upset and feel not just lied to, betrayed by this entire plan that, by the way, is being overseen by the Internal Revenue Service. Next up, we have the ongoing Middle East crisis, and I think this is a huge story. There's never been a time when, this crisis has been more of a problem and could explode in a way that could affect the entire world. And here's what they're working on right now, and that is that, a deal is taking shape. A deal is taking shape with Tehran's nuclear program. Now, that's the headline you see on the Wall Street Journal, but you're also seeing headlines where Iran is demanding that they expand their nuclear program. And they've been down this road several times with this, negotiation with some of the biggest countries in the world, including the United States, Russia, and China. And they haven't had many results. And this is a thing where it does have an expiration. At some point, the talking will have to stop, and somebody will say, okay, it's BS on the BS. And that's going to be a rough time if and when I hope they work out a deal. But if they don't, there's going to be a very big problem. Iran really wants to trade a lessening of these sanctions for, maybe a little curtailment of their nuclear program. And so far, their program hasn't been curtailed. As a matter of fact, it's been reported in the last few weeks, they are expanding it. Keep your eye on the Middle East. There has been no time in history that a story like this could spin out of control. And speaking of the economy, next story I want to talk about, I'm moving on to the economy, I should say, is that, have you heard about this University of Missouri, Kansas City professor? His name is Randall Wray. He and his PhD students have figured out what the real Fed exposure is. We've been told that, the balance sheet is approaching $4 trillion. Professor Wray says, no. No, he and his students just figured out the real exposure for the Federal Reserve, listen to this now, is $29 trillion. Let's say it again. The real exposure is $29 trillion. And that, according to Professor Wray, the Fed is intentionally underrepresenting the size of its exposure. Wow, you think? What do you think happens to the dollar when everybody says, whoa, the exposure is how much? 29 trillion is the Federal Reserve exposure? Well, don't dollars turn into funny money when the world wakes up to that and realizes that? And you wonder why people like Jim Sinclair say gold is going to be $50,000 an ounce sometime around 2020. You wonder why people like Eric Sprott are saying you should buy silver for the long term and hold on to it. It's unbelievable, the amount of exposure by the Federal Reserve of what they had to do to fix and prop up the economy since 2008. And I say fix, I don't really mean fix, I mean keep it from falling into a black hole of red ink. And the red ink is $29 trillion, according to one professor at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Next up, you talk about the jobs, and think about that. If they printed this much money, $29 trillion, they're exposed that much, the economy should be taken off like a rocket, shouldn't it? But it's not. And most people's common experience is it's really not. And take a look at this headline from the USA Today. Financial firms / jobs. Now, so far since the beginning of this year, 49,000 jobs have been slashed. And if the economy was recovering, would they be adding or at least holding those jobs? After all, they finance houses and new businesses and projects that, employ people. But instead, they're slashing jobs. And incidentally, as another side note to the economy that has not been reported yet, but wait till the reporting comes in the future about the effects of ObamaCare. Like the guy that has to pay $800 a month for his health care, $1,600 a month for his health care instead of $800 a month, and this guy won't be getting subsidies. And all the other people that say, wow, my health care premiums have doubled and tripled. Wait until that drag, that boat anchor on a fragile economy, kicks into high gear, next year or already this year. But for sure, Obamacare is going to be a colossal drag on the economy. And finally, Fukushima. Some folks have written me and said, hey, you really need to cover that story more. And you know what? They're right. Have you heard about the Texas-sized debris field in the Pacific Ocean floating towards California? Yes, and this is confirmed by a government website, NOAA. A Texas-sized debris field floating towards California from Fukushima. Now, they say there's not a radiological effect, I guess because, the tsunami came in, washed everything out before, the TEPCO power plant blew up. But still, there's plenty of facts of Fukushima that are happening on the West Coast. There's a story on my USAWatchdog.com under Hunter's Top Stories that lists several multiple things that you can see, higher radiation levels in fish and, loss of life and growths on certain sea animals and mammals and fish and wildlife. And the Fukushima story, in my humble opinion, is way underreported, if not ignored by the mainstream media. And it is not over by a very long shot. Thank you very much for supporting USA Watchdog with your comments and your donations. I really appreciate that. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Have a nice weekend.